All righty, committee, we're going to go ahead and get started. If somebody will shut that door. Yep, thank you. Today we have just two informational hearings. The first one's going to be on HB 2649 committee. If you guys followed along the President's State of the Union address, he referenced a federal program that he wants to enact, very similar to this state program that was brought to us by AARP. The bill died at turnaround. It didn't get worked or heard, but we wanted to bring folks in to kind of discuss the outline of the bill and how it would work functionally here in Kansas. So with that, we're actually going to bring up our state treasurer, Stephen Johnson. Stephen's a very busy guy. He's got to get out after this real quick, so we're going to bring him up and have him go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Stephen Johnson, State Treasurer, and thank you to the Chair and the members of the committee to give this a little bit of time. And I'll head to another hearing at 9:30, but Tom Tracy will be here should any questions persist. He's probably more expert on it than I. So you have the testimony that I have. You'll have some great folks to continue to hear from on the topic. But from the Treasurer's Office, one of our efforts has been financial literacy in general. And one of the better ways to learn how to invest is to invest. And that was the point of some of the Trump administration proposals, is how do you make that possible? And how do you make it easy to do the right thing? And also importantly is time. The earlier you start, the easier it is to be able to plan for and have whatever it is that you're, whether it's education, retirement, et cetera, to plan towards that. So in Kansas and in other places, there is a challenge for some employees who do not have access to a retirement plan. Many do. Our larger companies tend to have them, and that is a great place to be able to build assets toward retirement. So the statistics are there, roughly 40%, 400,000. I bet you'll hear that detail from other conferees well. There's a second part to that. When people fail to plan, it can often become a greater burden on the state. So Pew has done some work to look at what is that cost on state programs when we don't have those individual assets. And I'll roll back to that also as we look at the benefits of a program over time. Most of us agree that having a retirement plan is a good thing. I think the issue that came in this bill, where I would disagree with some of my friends in the room, is whether or not the opt-out should be at the employer level or at the employee level. There has to be an opt-out. There are people who can't do that. So does the employee make the decision that I'm not going to do it, or does the employer? So one of the keys, again, is in making it easy. So when I had the opportunity to sit in chairs where you are now, I heard the same plan, and my reaction was, that's what we do in private industry. Why would I have government necessarily do what we do? And there is a set that is harder to serve from private industry. As I get to smaller employers with smaller amounts, it becomes harder feasibly to be able to economically meet that retirement plan. Not impossible. Bless the folks who are able to do that, and I wish them well in being able to. But even as we look at other state plans, where there are not sufficient assets, it becomes very hard to find a manager behind the scenes to put the finances together to offer that program and communicate about it. But the uptake when you flip the switch from opt-in to opt-out, you see a massive change in how many people do the plan. It is so much easier in our busy lives if I don't have to do something to hit the easy button and go the direction of the track that I'm on than making a change. So that's where the opt-out at the employee level materially increases participation. One study found that increased from the percent of employees that take those plans increases from 37 to 86%. So I don't know exactly what it would be in any given case, but I think it's safe to say it's likely to be more than double. And in particular, I think it helps us reach that person that might not otherwise do anything, that might not take any action, either based on focus, time, perception of what it costs. But how do we do it then is one of the things that we were interested in, and several other states have engaged in similar programs, and it aligns somewhat with what we do on the 529 for education and ABLE savings plans, making sure that plans are run well, making sure that data is protected. And if I were asked how I might design it, I would see it as a bare bones program, fairly low in cost to be efficient for the investor, but also low in choices. If somebody wants a good plan where employers can contribute, there are plenty of plans available in the private market, and I think that would be the right place to go for that type of plan, where there is advice, where there is the chance to tailor that and help people make the selections they need. But in those situations where there's 10 employees and they may be contributing less than $100 a month if they're contributing 5% of their salary, that's one where having just a glide path to the year that they retire can be a simple choice to get started, see and start to learn how that growth works, and set themselves up for retirement. So in that, I see some benefits at various points. If I just look at some states that implemented plans that did have the opt-out at the employee level, they actually saw an increase in the number of private plans in the years that those plans were implemented at the state level. It motivated the employer to say, what do we really want for our employees? And in the case of Oregon, I've heard statistics as much as a 40% increase in the plans offered in the private sector when it went in place. I'm guessing those are all smaller plans. I'm guessing the dollars are smaller dollars, but the number of plans increase was fairly large. The second piece is I think it grows wealth for both people and advisors who I may or may not serve. Over time, I might have an employer plan that gets $250,000 and now is something where that employer might roll that to another plan and look at what options they can have for both themselves and their employees. Employees who otherwise would have done nothing, who in 10 years have $20,000 as something to start with and understand how the market works and start planning towards their retirement and other goals. And then from the state perspective, if I look at some of those that have more traction, so California is the largest plan. They're over $1 billion. And while it doesn't solve every retirement problem by any stretch, it's still $1 billion of assets that that group of folks has as they approach retirement. And several things happen with that. With that, we find most people make pretty prudent decisions with their own money when there's skin in the game. And that also, even if it holds them off of the state program for 4 years, for 8 years, makes a material difference in what those costs are as the state looks long-term at the planning. So as we look at it, I think there is a need for a retirement plan for some smaller employers. I think it needs to be made very easy for them to do business, however that looks. I think the opportunity for those employees to start understanding the market and building wealth is something that first serves them well and second can actually serve the state well as we work towards it. I won't pretend that anything is easy, but I really appreciate the committee's time and everyone that's here today just to talk about it and see if there's a path forward for Kansas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Will you stand for questions before you have to run off?
I'd be glad to.
Committee, do we have any questions for the Treasurer? Vice Chair Steens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Treasurer, for being here today. Yeah, I have a question. So I am in a small business myself now, and I guess part of me is like, okay, what's the benefit of this, doing your own investment right now? And maybe that's something that's a question, like you said, many people aren't thinking that way. And then if you are in a business, would the employees have some sort of say into what those investments would be and their contributions? And then also, how would the state be in charge of that? Like, how would that look? Thank you.
So thank you for the question. And so, yes, I think it would look similar to the 529 plan, where there are a few basic options where if you want to mix your own portfolio to take relatively more or less risk, you can. Or you can engage and say, I'm going to retire in 2050. So I'll be in whatever glide path we set up to approach that year of retirement. And then we would partner with a firm, we would bid it out and say, who wants to manage this for us, as we have done on other plans, and work with them to actually build the portfolios. They would manage the accounts just like they do for their other retirement asset businesses. I would assume it'd be a company that's already in that business that would take it on. I think we would keep our choices for individuals limited just to make it efficient. It likely will be with smaller dollar amounts, so having a lot of choice is one that probably wouldn't be effective economically. And I think it also would, I think it's in the best interest to continue to let the real advice piece be done by the industry that gives advice, where ours would be pretty cookie cutter type responses for folks just to get started.
Thank you. I like the portability part to this. I think that's a definite benefit, but just, I know that would be questions that people would kind of want to consider. So thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. Treasurer, how would this interact? Because you guys would serve basically almost as a pass-through with the foreign divestment bill that we passed a couple of years ago. Would that apply to these investments?
So that is a good question. We have chosen to apply that to our investments that we have. However, we're not 100% sure in that it's actually owned by the individuals and not by the state-directed assets. It's just easy enough to keep it clean that way, and we look at what the options are that most likely in this simpler world, we wouldn't have an emerging market option, which would be the area where you'd likely have the China exposure.
And I know, you've been involved with some conversations on the federal level, especially with the president's idea that he unrolled at the State of the Union. Is their concept right now having this just federally applied and administered federally or on a state level?
So that one at the federal level is just getting started as they've talked about it. And yes, my understanding for that is that one would be administered federally and would be tailored to the thrift plan options that are there, which would be another approach similar to the problem of trying to meet it. As in working with the Section 530 or Trump accounts, the concept is the same. Get people started early, get them in the market somewhere so they see what that looks like. Earning 6 to 7% is so much different than earning 3 to 4% when you compound it over time. How do we make that happen? So they have been focused on the Trump account so far, which is 18 and below, and the retirement plan gives us a chance to focus on those folks 18 and over.
Maybe do you have any further questions? Coach?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I see young people changing jobs so much. How would that change? You're talking about small plans. Are we hoping for an employer match? And with the people, if I could do over, I would probably, if I could afford it, I would go a Roth. And is that an option? So thank you.
So those are great questions. Thank you for those. And would there be a match? Probably not in the state plan unless we went the Utah direction where we had more of a clearinghouse option that is there. If we just went with the bare bones plan, we would probably leave those nicer plans to the private sector to manage and tailor those to each of the companies, but just offer one of the simplest options we could to give people that easy button. To the Roth versus IRA, It depends on the direction of the Savers Match, which is a program that comes out next year where there's an option for folks to get a match on savings in retirement plans up to 50 cents on the dollar, up to $2,000 for a $1,000 match. Did I get that right, Tom? That currently is slated towards tax-deferred accounts, which would drive us to an IRA versus a Roth. The other consideration that we'd have is the IRA may have a few more strings attached that in that transition where I leave my company and I roll my plan to an IRA or possibly to another employer, if it's in the Roth, it may have a higher chance of being used as a cash reserve than being held over time. So I don't know on the Roth to IRA option, but I would say the default is probably the straight IRA. Was there another part of your question that I haven't hit?
People change jobs so often, they just transfer it to the next company and let them take it out of their check, or?
So there'd be a number of options at that point. So most likely, if they go to another employer, it's the easiest to roll it. It may be the easiest just to roll it to their own IRA in that process. So yes, thanks for the question.
All right, Mr. Treasurer, I know you have to run. Thank you for stopping by this morning and giving us your insight on this, and looking forward to working with you in the future on it. Thank you. All righty, up next, we're going to call up Megan Lynn, Associate State Director of Advocacy for AARP Kansas. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan Lynn, Associate State Director for Advocacy for AARP Kansas. Thank you again for the opportunity to have this informational hearing on what we call the Kansas Empowerment Savings Program. For today's hearing, we would actually like to present two conferees. The first is Jessica Ekman. Jessica is our Government Affairs Director for Financial Security and Livable Communities at our AARP National Office. Her expertise focuses on retirement security and state-facilitated retirement savings programs. And then following Jessica's presentation, our AARP Kansas State Director, Glenda DuBois, will present why our Work and Save program is so vital to the economic prosperity for Kansans. So thank you again.
All righty, and do we have Jessica with us online? Perfect. Jessica,
Hello.
the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I am trying to share my PowerPoint, and WebEx is a little foreign to me. I apologize, and it's not working. If I don't get this to work, I will make sure that the committee members have those PowerPoint slides.
I think we may have it.
Okay. In the interest of time,
yeah.
I will just dive in and you can just listen to me talk about it.
Yep, we do have it.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Jessica Ekman. I am a Government Affairs Director with the AARP National Office, where I focus on retirement security and state-facilitated retirement savings programs. So internally, what we often call this is Work and Save. So when I talk about Work and Save, that's what I mean. At AARP, we spend a lot of time looking at what it takes for people to age with dignity and independence. And one of the biggest factors in that, one that cuts across income levels, geography, life experience, is whether people have enough saved for retirement. It affects everything, right? So whether you can stay in your homes, afford your medications, keep the lights on, help with your grandkids, everything. So today I want to talk about the retirement crisis that we're facing as a country. Treasurer Johnson did a fantastic job of laying all of this out. I'm going to provide a little additional context. My goal is to give you a clear picture of the problem, why we're here in the first place, and a sense of what is working around the country. So the retirement crisis did not happen overnight. It's been building for a very long time. As the economy has shifted, pensions have declined, and more responsibility has been placed on individuals to save on their own. So right now, more than half of US households are at risk of not having enough money to maintain their standard of living in retirement. And when we talk about standard of living, we are not talking about the fun stuff. We're talking about the basics, things like food, utilities, and healthcare. So for many people, retirement is not a time when they can slow down and enjoy life. It's a period of significant financial stress. And that stress does not just affect individuals, it affects families, communities, and ultimately taxpayers. Because when people don't have enough saved, they often turn to public assistance programs to fill that gap. One of the more striking statistics we see is that nearly 60% of households have no retirement savings at all. So that's nothing, zero, nothing set aside. And it's not just younger workers either. There are a significant share of people ages 55 to 64, those who are right on the cusp of retirement, who have no savings, and that's a really tough place to be. So everybody agrees that saving for retirement is very important. The question is, why are people not saving? Is it lack of awareness, lack of discipline, something else? And what we found is that the biggest barrier is not motivation, it's access. So access to a workplace retirement plan is one of the strongest predictors of whether someone saves. But today, nearly half of private sector workers, so that's about 56 million people across the United States, don't have access to a retirement plan at work. And that number has been stubbornly high for decades and decades. When we talk to small business owners, we do survey work all around the country. The reason is very clear. They are running payroll, they're managing their staff, they're just keeping their doors open. And setting up a retirement plan in the private sector is expensive, it's confusing, and it's time consuming. So many employers, small employers, tell us they would love to offer a plan, but it's simply not realistic with everything else on their plate. So the result is that tens of millions of workers, especially those at small businesses, they never get a chance to save at work. And that brings us to the next question, which is if they don't have access at work, can't they just go out and open an IRA on their own? And technically, yes, you can just walk into a bank or go online and open an individual retirement account. But the reality is that most people don't. What we know from research is that people who have access to workplace savings plans are 15 times more likely to save. That automatic payroll deduction is sort of the magic ingredient. It makes savings the default instead of something people have to remember to do and choose to do over and over. Without that automatic mechanism, people tend to put it off, not because they don't want to save, but life gets in the way. And this is why access at work is so critical, and that's what we're trying to solve for. So work and save programs take all of these challenges, lack of access, small business constraints, the need for automatic payroll deduction, and turn them into a very practical solution. So these programs are public-private partnerships. The state sets up the framework, the private sector financial firms manage the investments and run the back of the house. Let the private sector do what the private sector does best. The goal is to give workers who don't have access at work a plan, a simple, affordable way to start saving. So for workers, the accounts are their own, they're portable, they're tied to the individual. If you change jobs, which people do very frequently, their savings goes with them. And for employers, the program is free. There are no fees associated with this. It's very simple, there's no burden on them. Employers, all they have to do is hand out a state-provided information packet and run payroll deductions. That's it. So there's no fiduciary responsibility, there are no matching contributions, there are no administrative headaches. It's essentially just one more checkbox in the sort of onboarding process. And for the state, these programs are designed to be self-sustaining over time, so there's no ongoing taxpayer cost. A few design features make these programs especially effective. We've talked about automatic enrollment. There's also participation by the individual is completely voluntary, right? So the worker is in control. They can change their contribution rate, they can pause contributions, or they can opt out entirely. And again, it's portable, right? So it follows the worker from job to job, which is especially important in today's economy where people change jobs all the time. So these features make saving simple, consistent, and accessible, especially for people who have not had a way to save before. Today, 20 states have enacted work and save programs, and the results are very impressive. Across these states, workers have saved closing in on $3 billion. And that's $3 billion that people didn't have before. So money that will help them stay independent and secure as they age. And what's important is that these savings are coming from workers who historically have been left out of the retirement system. They're lower income workers more often than not, part-time workers, workers at small businesses. When you give people a simple automatic way to save, they do take advantage of that. And we've seen that time and time again across states. So I want to close with one more number, $1.3 trillion. So that's what Pew Charitable Trusts estimates it'll cost taxpayers across the country over the next 20 years if we don't address the retirement savings gap. When people reach retirement without enough savings, they often turn to public assistance programs, and that adds up very quickly. Work and save programs really do help people build their own financial security and reduce future reliance on taxpayer-funded programs. So it's a win for workers, it's a win for businesses, and it is a win for the state budget at the end of the day. So that's all I have today for my formal presentation, but thank you again for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Jessica, thank you so much for that. I do have a question starting off. 20 states have enacted some type of work and save program. I'm not sure familiar with the fiscal note we received on this. It kind of red flag for me was Department of Labor says it's going to take 37 FTEs to administer this program. We do have a representative from Department of Labor that will be before us to kind of explain that rationale. But in other states that have enacted this, have you seen a fiscal note like that?
Yeah, so that was, I was very surprised. That was a red flag to me as well. I was very surprised with the fiscal note. And I think it may just demonstrate sort of a miscommunication about how this functions, right? Because it is a public-private partnership. So the private sector carries a lot of the ARP actually have on contract a consultant who was the first executive director of the Oregon Saves program. I had a chat with her, and a lot of the staffing is not public. She made a few phone calls for us, but in order to compare Kansas with Oregon, so Kansas is a mid-sized state like Oregon. Oregon has about 1 million more people. Oregon's standalone program currently has 3 FTE total, and less than 1 person handles compliance. So 37 FTEs to handle compliance is just a completely different atypical structure, and that's not what we would see in practical carrying out of the program.
I appreciate that. Second question, in these other states that have enacted it, we occasionally have the business owner that does not remit withholdings tax. And I assume that this could be another area where he's not remitting, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say he, they are not remitting the withholding for this program. Who's responsible at the end of the day for that? Is the employee still credited with what he contributed, even though that money didn't make it to the destination?
Yeah, and so that's why compliance is important, right? It's something where we see in other states when you don't have compliance sort of baked into the model, into the legislation, it's not as functional. I have small children. Threats sometimes work. They work very well. What we've seen in other states is, generally speaking, the compliance doesn't usually take place. There are a lot of chances given to an employer to remedy and rectify the situation before any penalties would come into play. I think it's important to have those included in any legislation for that reason. But generally speaking, that money, the employer is on the hook for that if they choose to not remit those payroll contributions. That's a legal issue, but programs do give a lot of leeway in the sense that they do not want to punish small business owners, right? Most of the sort of snafus along the way are just a mistake. They get rectified, the employee gets their contribution put in their account, everybody moves on. There's no need to penalize small business owners needlessly, but I think that having compliance baked in is an important part.
Appreciate that. Jessica, committee, do we have any further questions for Jessica? Vice Chair Steens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica, thank you for being here. I just had a really quick question. you know, we're talking about people like not saving and things like that. Do you think that some of that is, I'm just trying to figure out, like, from a standpoint, is it education? Like, we're not educating people enough when they're young enough still? Or are people thinking about that more? Because 401ks, obviously, and those things have been around for a while. And so I'm just curious what your thoughts may be on why people are still not doing that saving. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a great question. And I think that's an important part. And I think that financial literacy and educating people about the need for savings is very important. But we've also had financial literacy for a long time, and it hasn't really moved the needle significantly where we need it to be. I am very lucky at my job. I have a 401k, I have a pension. I was automatically enrolled. I could opt out, I chose not to. And that is where sort of like the secret sauce happens, right? Because when you don't have to do anything, when there's no additional step, that is when most people choose to save. And I think we all have a long to-do list. Everybody has a long to-do list, right? That doesn't change for anybody, whatever that to-do list looks like. And if you have to add one more item to that list in order to save, it just increases friction. And we're trying to reduce that friction so that people can save seamlessly.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Jessica. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
No, Jessica, 1 second, Representative Weichel.
Thank you, Jessica, for the information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious if you know, on average, how much people save, like what percentage of their salary they're putting into these accounts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Usually these programs have somewhere between 3, 4, 5, 6% as sort of the default contribution rate. And so there's always a default, right? You default into a Roth IRA, you default at 5% of your paycheck. You as the employee, you can move that up, you can move that down, however you choose to handle it, or opt out entirely, of course. There's usually automatic escalation, right? That's sort of a best practice in the private sector as well. So there's usually a cap. It goes up to 10%. Some states might have a little bit higher at 12%. You can choose to not automatically escalate your contributions, but it is a good way to keep the ball rolling and keep those contributions growing. There's always a default, right? So you can do nothing and things start happening, which is important for savings, but you are always in control. You can always change that at any time.
Coach.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I know the importance of savings, and I've worked hard on that my whole life. But I go to the nursing home and I see these people that have saved and their money disappears so fast. I don't know if my question's making any sense or not. Where somebody that hasn't saved, they might be in better shape than somebody that did. So is my question, do you understand what I'm saying there?
I think I do, and thank you for that. I think that we have over the years had similar questions that sometimes people can't save or they can't save enough, and nobody's going to get rich off of these programs. Nobody's going to retire to a yacht in the south of France, as much as we would all love that. This is truly meant to supplement your income, to delay taking Social Security, to give you a few more years without relying on taxpayer-funded public assistance programs, right? There are many people that sort of benefit from this, and it's not just the individual, it's also the taxpayer.
Seeing no further questions, thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
All righty, Glenda Du Bois is up next, State Director for AARP Kansas. Glenda, welcome to the committee. It's always great seeing you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for allowing me to present to you today. I am Glenda Du Bois, and I'm the State Director for AARP Kansas. And as it's been said, we know that AARP is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And nationwide, we have over 38,000 million members. But here in Kansas, we have over 278,000 members. And we advocate for policies that really strengthen the financial security for people of all ages. And it's been said, and some of this will be repetitive, but I think that this is so important that some of it actually deems being repeated. More than 45 Kansas private sector workers, or 40% of them, lack access to the workplace retirement plan. And we know, as we are talking about today, particularly those that are in small businesses. So without that employee-based option, as we've heard, see Kansans struggling to become more, and they may become more reliant on tax-funded programs. And this is what we're wanting to avoid. And speaking specifically around those who end up just receiving Social Security and having only Social Security as their income, we know that with the average income of Social Security is about $21,000 a year. But even just thinking about the basic expenses and what they average out to be about $24,000 a year. So, that's not a wide gap, but still we see that there's a gap there. So again, as Jessica has just mentioned, and we're so appreciative to her and to the State Treasurer for their presentation and information. We know that specifically here in Kansas, we did do a survey, and we found from that in December of 2024 that 86% of the business owners that we surveyed agreed that something should be done or more should be done. 77% of them worry about taxpayers that will end up with inadequate savings. And nearly 2/3 of them would likely offer a state-facilitated plan. Many cited, though, the cost, the complexity, and time, as Jessica has mentioned, as a barrier for why they're not doing this currently. So we know, again, about the lack of access being not dependent upon your age or your education or your race, and about 337,000 Kansans earning $53,000 or less. It even impacts them. So again, as we've talked about the savings behavior, that having a automatic type of savings plan offers. And so that's a plus. We know also specifically in Kansas here, when we're looking at what impact it could have on us, if there's been inadequate savings over these years, we know that at this point it could cost our state over $2 billion within the next 20 years. So that's something I think we are concerned about. AARP, we support a public-private retirement savings partnership that provides the things we've heard: the voluntary portable account that's co-owned by the worker, the payroll deduction savings that move from the worker, with that worker, from job to job, and also no ongoing cost to the state or their being liable. So again, the House Bill 2649, the Kansas Empowerment Savings Plan, establishes that portable, low-cost IRA type programs. The key features of it, as we've talked about, would be the automatic enrollment. The 5% default contribution is what we would be starting out with, and it would have that portability across jobs. It would be created by a board of trustees that would work with the State Treasurer's office, including the State Treasurer, the CAPERS Executive Director, 3 investment experts, 1 employer representative, and 1 employee participant representative for that feedback and that input. And this board would oversee the program. They would select the investment managers we've heard about, and also they would be responsible for developing the educational materials and conducting the public outreach, as we see very much now with even like the 529 plan. The employers' participation on that is that they, again, those employers here in Kansas that have 5 or more employees that currently do not offer any type of qualified plan would be asked if they would, and if they've been in business for less than a year and haven't offered a plan in the past 2 years, if they would participate. If they would offer this to their employees with no cost to them by just adding that payroll deduction and withholding those contributions, and then sending them forward within like a 14-day time frame. Again, this plan is being put forth as a way to do this, but not being a burden to the employer. So why does all of this matter while we're here? It's because this will strengthen financial security. It will make that savings automatic and accessible. It will reduce the senior poverty and reliance on safety net programs that we've heard about even here today. It would support the small businesses, and that's really one of our primary goals because they have no employer fiduciary liability. There could potentially be grant opportunities that would help them offset any administrative efforts. It would be fiscally responsible. No state liability or account performance would be expected. And there would be startup costs, as I mentioned, to perhaps pay back. So in conclusion, HB 2649, it's a common sense. We see it just as a common sense, market-based solution that strengthens retirement security. It supports small businesses and protects the taxpayers. It ensures that Kansas workers at every level has the opportunity to build that long-term financial security that we who are in the job market have that opportunity. It gives everyone that potential opportunity to do that. So again, thank you for this opportunity to have met with you individually and to able to prepare and share for you today this private, public-private retirement program that we really think will benefit Kansas and it will benefit us for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I stand for questions.
Thank you so much for that, Glinda. Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in today. Might have a couple. Okay. How many employers would be required to do this with the 5 employees or more?
That's a good question, and thank you for that. That is a question that we would have to get and give you that number back. I don't have the total number.
No problem. I guess my question is this: why are we choosing 5 versus 20? And would you be willing to say at 20, okay, yes, we'll do the program at between 5 and 20, then have more of an opt-in versus an opt-out? I don't know, with going as far down as 5 and the way that the payroll systems are managed and stuff like that, at 5, it may not even be something that those employers are using a payroll system to where it would be easily deducted and then moving the money around, because with 5 employees, they may or may not be using paychecks or like an ADP and stuff like that. That's my concern there. So if we could get some more details on that, that'd be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, that's good. We have seen some of those programs that number, but the 5 to 10 has been where they've started, but there's also the potential of looking at how that relates to Kansas and determining, that's one of our primary goals. It is determining starting here with 5 is a starting point, right? And then looking at the numbers to see what really is the best number for us to use. So that's something we can absolutely consider and respond.
Committee, any further questions? I see none. Thank you so much, Glinda. It's been great working with you this year on all different types of subjects. So looking forward to continuing that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Glinda. All right, I see Liz. So did you want to add anything? No, you're just here to watch? Gotcha. Okay. All righty. The fiscal notes came up a couple of times on this topic. So we have somebody from the Department of Labor, Nigel Haben? Nigel? And just kind of walk us through the fiscal note, namely the 37 FTEs Department of Labor is saying, at least from their understanding of how this bill would work, they would need for this.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Nigel Haben, and I am the Government Affairs Coordinator for the Kansas Department of Labor. I'm here today to speak on behalf of KDOL, specifically in regards to our fiscal note we submitted for HB 2649, which did include 37 FTEs. So this bill would introduce new programmatic responsibilities for KDOL. And so when this bill dropped, this was the first time we saw this, and this is kind of a new frontier for us. And so we really worked to understand the role we would have within the bill and within the program in the limited time frame we had to submit the fiscal note. So based on our reading of the bill, KDOL understands that we would share responsibilities with the Kansas Empowerment Savings Program Board to enforce compliance. That's the main way we're implicated. So this is enumerated in Section 6 and Section 17 were mentioned. So since this savings board would be a new program for the state of Kansas and for KDOL, we really had no clear analog, all right? This was new to us. So we didn't really know where to base our fiscal impact on. However, since we saw that the bill may impact every single employer in the state, we looked at similar state programs that we administer currently, and we decided that unemployment insurance enforcement and appeals process and that workload was the closest analog to this program. And so basically the 37 FTE we submitted for this bill is based on the workload for that program. So that said, we really are not wedded to this figure. Okay, based on conversations today and conversations in the future, we're really open to revising this estimate. I think the biggest clarity we need, and we just mentioned it, is really we need to refine, in order to refine our figure, we need to know how many employers would be subject to this bill, right? We need to know how many employers may opt in. From my understanding, there's, employers may actually opt into this program as well. And in total, basically, how many individuals would ultimately enroll. So I think these figures, you can right set the compliance and the resultant appeals process to the size of the program. So saying that no matter the scope of the eventual program, there will be some sort of fiscal impact speaking towards the enforcement of the compliance and kind of an inherent appeals process that stems from it. So I hope that explanation was enough. With that, I stand for questions.
Representative Weichel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I heard you correctly that you based this on the unemployment insurance work, and you said something like 100% of all employers participate in unemployment insurance. But previous testimony today said that only 43% of private sector workers don't have access to a retirement plan. So I can't imagine, this isn't going to be every employer in Kansas that would be in this new program. So that alone seems like that would pretty drastically cut down the number of FTEs needed.
Yeah, so we're certainly looking, we're open to refining our estimate.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, along those lines, it's my understanding when there's an unemployment claim that can be several touches. And so, again, I think I would strongly recommend you go back and look at that because, as my colleague just said, looking at maybe 44%, and compliance with employers is going to be a little bit different than trying to get all of the information to manage unemployment claims. I think that's just common sense. So looking forward to that change.
Sure.
Coach.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No question, just a comment.
Sure.
The 37 FTEs scare me like it does these ladies. So, that just seems like an awful lot when we're trying to get something started. So thank you.
So, seeing no further questions, we've got a couple weeks left in session. Is there a way you can work with the proponents of the bill to try to get an updated fiscal note by the end of session to us? We'd greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. We're certainly open.
Okay, and if you guys need any further, clarity within the legislation, let us know too. But I would love to see an updated fiscal note working with the proponents on figuring out what that total cost is.
Sure thing. Yep.
Thank you so much, sir, for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you. All righty, since this does impact businesses, I figured we'd bring in a business community to give their side of it. So William Wilk, I bet you in your wildest dreams you'd never be testifying twice in banking in one day.
Well, I think this is my first time in the banking committee, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. William Wilk, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Kansas Chamber. I'll just be very brief. I know time is of the essence. Ultimately, we just view this bill as a mandate on the Kansas business community. If the bill remains a mandate, we will maintain our opposition going forward. If the mandate provisions are removed and it is totally optional, then the Kansas Chamber would move to neutral on the bill. While we appreciate the intent and the spirit of the legislation to encourage folks to save, we just view this as an unnecessary mandate on the Kansas business community. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank Thank you for that. And I believe in your written testimony, you do have some stats. You guys did do a survey of your members.
Yeah, we did a survey with our small business membership, and you can see the numbers that we asked. Two main questions. Does your company provide a retirement plan benefit to your employees? And that was 72% said they did. And the other question was, if given the opportunity, would you rather opt into or have the state of Kansas manage a retirement account for your employees? And 81% said they would not.
And when you say small business, what are you guys considering small business?
That, I believe it was 20 FTEs or fewer. That was what we surveyed on.
Okay. Committee, do we have any questions for Mr. Wilk? Seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All righty, that's all we have on this. We do have some kind of written only opponent testimony from Kelly Venzwall with the KBA, so definitely check that out. Again, this was introduced, it's dead for the year, but I think it's an interesting topic that I'm sure we'll be hearing about again next session, especially with the president pushing it on the federal level. So just wanted to give a refresher to the committee, and again, look forward to having that discussion again next year. All righty, the second presentation today, it's going to be the Paid Family Leave Act informational briefing. Sean, are you coming up, or are you just going to start with? Okay. Yep. Looks like first up, we're going to have Tracy Russell, CEO of Nurture KC. Tracy, welcome to the committee.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tracy Russell. I serve as the Chief Executive Officer of Nurture KC. We are an organization in Wyandotte County that serves pregnant women and their children. And that's really how I came to the Paid Leave for Working Kansans Coalition, was on that parental leave piece. We know that there are incredible impacts if parents are allowed to be with that child in the first 12 weeks of life, on everything from increased bonding between parent and child to reduced postpartum depression, even to reduced infant mortality in states that have enacted this. And so far, we've had 14 jurisdictions across the country that have done this. And I think just as importantly is you have 40 states that has some form of paid parental leave for state employees. And so this has absolutely been a bipartisan issue across the country. I believe the latest states to take action through executive order is Iowa, enacted paid parental leave for state employees, and Indiana actually expanded their paid parental leave for state employees. Kansas has that as well. Under then Governor Collier, he instituted paid leave for parents, for state employees of 6 weeks. That was increased to 8 weeks a few years ago. So in terms of our coalition, we are a broad group, many of us in kind of the mother-baby space, but other groups as well, including the American Heart Association, Thrive, Head Start, Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition, Kansas Birth Equity Network, and Kansas Birth Justice Society. And we began this work a couple of years ago as we really saw a need to adapt to what we're offering to employees in the workplace and not force families into making a choice between economic survival and well-being of family. So this would not just apply to parents per se, but there are some other circumstances under which paid leave would be granted. That would include if someone has their own serious health condition. So for instance, if you've got a cancer diagnosis and are going through treatment, it doesn't mean that you have to quit your job in order to undergo that. In addition, this would apply for senior care. You know, I was listening with interest on the AARP bill and couldn't agree more in terms of, you know, we have an aging population in this state. Our system of care for seniors really needs a comprehensive look, and I know that this body is taking steps to do that. We believe that paid leave to care for senior parents could have outsized benefits in terms of keeping folks in their home, allowing them to age in place with dignity. And so from a mechanics perspective, what are we talking about exactly? We've modeled this somewhat after the federal FMLA law in terms of looking at 12 weeks total in a given year for time off. Most states that have adopted this also require notice to the employers before you can take leave. Most provide a minimum of 30 days in order to do that. This is administered through the state, although there are some public-private partnerships. As I say, there are 14 jurisdictions that have this, and all 14 have something different within theirs. This would be funded via a payroll contribution from employer and employee. It does not require SGF funding to pay for family leave, which we think would have great benefits for the state as a whole. In the states that have done this, most are right around 1% payroll contribution total, not from employer and employee, but total. So in Kansas, for your average paid worker, that would be about $20 a month for each side, which is quite a benefit for that price. And this also has an opt-out mechanism for employers who are already offering a plan that is equal to or greater than what the state is proposing. They could keep that. They would not have to join the state pool. And so we really view this as a great incentive for small employers to recruit and retain the best and brightest, and that this will level the playing field somewhat for those folks. It also removes the administrative burden for small employers in particular. Now, I will say in some of the states that have adopted this, they have seen big employers ultimately come into the plan because they see that it's more cost effective, it's more efficient for them not to have to administer it themselves. So that's been the experience elsewhere. And in conclusion, I believe that this is one of the most impactful pro-family policies that we could adopt in the state of Kansas. It recognizes that at one point or another, virtually all of us are going to have some life circumstances that require us to step away even for a short period, and that policies like this build employee loyalty. It keeps many folks in the workforce who might otherwise have to drop out if they don't have access to this. And just one closing statistic, with mothers, 1 in 4 is currently back in the workplace within 2 weeks of giving birth. And we think we can do better than that, that it's important for families, and I would stand for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I think we'll hold off on questions till the very end on this one. Thank you, Tracy. Up next, we're going to have Abby Lane. Abby, welcome to committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Let's move the slides. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for having us for this briefing today. My name is Abby Lane, and I'm the Policy Director at the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center, a nonpartisan research center based at Vanderbilt University. Our center focuses on identifying state policies that have been proven effective by rigorous research, with an emphasis on policies that are helping our children and families thrive in the earliest years of life. We do not take official positions on legislation, and my commentary reflects the research on this topic and not the views of the university. I want to start with how we started at the center, because I think it's important context to understand where I'm coming from. So when we first started, we started with a few essential questions. What does rigorous scientific research tell us that children and families need to thrive in the earliest days of life, and which state policies help build this system of care? We did not start with policy solutions, and we let theory and research guide us to our findings. As a result of this work, we've identified a host of policies and strategies that are effective at improving outcomes in the prenatal to 3 period, which we know sets the stage for later development. These policies include both broad-based economic supports as well as more targeted interventions. Among these policies is paid family and medical leave for new parents. And the most rigorous research available points to the fact that programs offering at least 12 weeks of paid leave for parents who give birth and 6 weeks for other parents lead to a host of positive impacts. Whoops. I want to briefly ground us in a shared understanding of how paid family and medical leave programs work. Although states typically require some sort of general revenue for startup fundings, programs, as Tracy mentioned, are often funded through both payroll contributions from employers or employees, though you can decide how that works specific for Kansas. Premiums are often less than 1% of payroll, and in many states it's about 0.5% in total. These cover the benefits and costs to administer the program. So so these programs are really self-sustaining. And once up and running, if the state does need to use any funding to set up the program, it's often required that the program pays it back. And in several states, this has been done ahead of schedule. Just so you have a sense of where other states stand, as of January 2026, 11 states in the District of Columbia have fully implemented a statewide paid family and medical leave program. No two of these programs are exactly alike, with variation in eligibility, benefit generosity, funding design, and other policy elements. And I say that in part to stress that Kansas can decide what the program is that works best for Kansans. In addition, as Tracy mentioned, a large number of states provide paid family leave benefits to at least some state employees, again with variation in program design. Today, I'm going to focus on the research related to paid bonding leave, or the leave that parents are taking specifically after a new child comes into their family to bond with them. Though paid family and medical leave often cover other really important parts of caregiving, including for oneself as well as for other family members, including aging family members. So examples of the impact of paid family and medical leave, and these are just a few, there are a lot more, are things like increased receipt of postpartum care, which we know is really essential to mothers' recovery after giving birth. Increased maternal labor force participation, including an increased likelihood that mothers are actually returning to their pre-birth employers. So these are good for families, these are good outcomes for families, but also great outcomes for businesses to have their employees come back. Paid family and medical leave is also associated with a reduction in poverty, as well as reduced food insecurity, pointing to the fact that a lot of families are taking these benefits from what they've paid into the program, right? And they're putting the basics back into their household. We also see a 12% reduction in post-neonatal infant mortality, as well as some really important indicators of our child-parent relationships, such as increased reports that parents can cope with the day-to-day demands of parenting, which is, of course, quite stressful when you have a new child that's just come into your family, as well as increased time that mothers are able to actually spend with their children, nurturing that relationship that we know folks need. Doing things like reading to their kids, going out for family activities, having breakfast together. We also see a decreased likelihood of infants receiving late vaccinations, as well as a decrease in pediatric abusive head trauma, which is, of course, a very important indicator of child welfare and child safety. So to learn more specifically about the impact of paid family and medical leave in Kansas, our center conducted a benefit cost analysis on the paid bonding leave portion of a proposed program. And even though all states have adopted these comprehensive programs, we're focusing on the impact of that bonding leave portion because that is where a lot of rigorous research has been conducted that can actually point to the program is implemented, so we see this benefit. We modeled a statewide program where parents are able to take up to 12 weeks of paid leave. They receive about 67% of their wages while they're on leave, up to a maximum weekly benefit of $1,000, and that the program is funded through both payroll contributions from employers and employees. As you can see here, the top line findings are pretty staggering. Each year, bonding leave results in a net benefit of $71 million to Kansas families, employers, and the state, outweighing costs by 11 to 1. Lifetime benefits to society are even greater than that. I'm not going to go into this in detail, but it's also in the materials submitted. But these are just some of the examples of specific impacts that we've used to inform this analysis. So for example, there's increased state tax revenue as a result of this. Families, when they receive those benefits, they spend that money. They put the money back into the economy. And when they're going back to work, they're also earning more money. You see increased business revenue as a result of decreased job turnover and higher worker productivity, and more women who are in leadership positions and in the workforce, as well as decreased hospital costs or healthcare costs associated with both having better food security in the state and fewer infant hospitalizations. I want to share one final example of how state policy choices significantly impact a family's total resources using our center's policy impact calculator, which illustrates how state policies interact to provide a minimum level of resources available to a family of 3. We call this family, or this mother, Lena, so meet Lena. She is a single parent who works a minimum wage job. She works full-time. She files her taxes and receives all the benefits she is eligible for. We assume that she takes 12 weeks of paid leave following the birth of her child. Though it is important to note that without access to paid leave, this is highly unlikely because she needs that money from work. And Lena sends her children to center-based care when they are not with her. Our calculator accounts for minimum wage earnings, childcare subsidies, and out-of-pocket childcare costs, federal nutrition programs, federal and state tax credits, and taxes paid, as well as federal and state payroll deductions. I realize this chart is a little bit hard to see on this, and I apologize for that, but want to point to a couple of things here. So under the proposed program, Lena receives $2,332 in paid bonding leave benefits. So you can see that in the after with paid family leave, that jump in the total resources that are shown there. Even after we factor in the premiums that she pays into this insurance program, as well as a slight reduction in SNAP benefits due to higher income and increases in her tax credits received because she is working and earning more money, the adoption of the paid family leave program actually increases family resources by a total of $3,257 just in the first year of life that the child is born. So for a worker who may be earning just under $29,000, this represents a substantial amount to the total resources that they have to provide for their family. These resources, this additional resources is equivalent to more than 5 months of groceries or several months of rent. To conclude, I just want to emphasize the importance of state-level policies for the well-being of families, and research suggests that paid family and medical leave benefits have substantial direct benefits on working parents, infants and toddlers, and the broader Kansas community. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much, Abby. Up next, we have Kim Parker with Pew Research. Kim, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Floor is
Great.
yours.
Thank you so much. I'm joining you from Bethesda, Maryland. As mentioned, I am with the Pew Research Center in Washington, D.C., and really happy to have the opportunity to share some of the data that we collected recently on a major survey about aging. So I'm going to be talking about caregiving needs later in life and family caregivers and sort of the growing burden that is causing for the country. First, I just want to say a few words about the Pew Research Center in case any of you aren't familiar with us or our mission. We are nonpartisan, non-advocacy, and nonprofit. So I just want to make clear that I'm not here to advocate for any specific policy outcomes. Our mission is basically to generate a foundation of facts to support sound decision-making and enrich the public dialogue. So as mentioned, I'm going to share some data from a survey that we conducted last fall on aging in America. And I don't know who is controlling the slides, but if we could go to the first slide after this one, perfect. Okay, so just want to underscore the aging of our population is really one of the most important and impactful demographic trends that we're facing as a nation this day, and really globally as well. By 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be age 65 or older, and that is up from 12% just 20 years ago. So it's happening pretty quickly, and it's something that we all need to pay attention to. This trend is being driven by a couple of other demographic trends that are happening in tandem. One is falling fertility rates, which I'm sure you all have been hearing and reading a lot about. This is a big trend in our country right now. Americans are having fewer children, which is, concentrating the share of older Americans and diminishing the share of younger Americans. Another fact that's contributing to aging is that life expectancy is increasing, which of course is good news. We did see it dip some in the early 2020s due to COVID, but it's back on the rise and has been increasing steadily for many decades. And then another important trend to keep in mind is that as immigration flows are diminishing with new policies and new approaches to immigration, that's going to have an important impact on aging going forward as well, because immigrants boost the size of the working age population and they also increase the birth rate. So all of these factors together are probably going to accelerate this trend towards the aging of America. And with all of that in mind, we'll continue to see a growing need for caregiving because Americans are getting older, but as we know, many older Americans need care, especially as they get into, much later into life. And research shows that family members are increasingly taking on this role, partly because of, it can be very burdensome financially, and sometimes that's the only option for some families. So our new survey finds that there are certain demographic groups that are more impacted than others. So among those who have an aging family member, lower income Americans are much more likely to play a caregiving role for either an aging parent, spouse, or partner, and women are more likely to take on this role as well. And then now getting to what is in this slide that you're seeing, our survey finds that overall, about 1 in 10, or exactly 1 in 10 Americans are consider themselves a caregiver for an aging parent, spouse, or partner, or that's for an aging parent. And among those who have a parent in that age group of 65 and older, the share rises to 24%. So that's a pretty high share. 1 in 4 Americans with an aging parent say they're a caregiver for an aging parent. The shares are lower for aging spouses or partners. 3% of Americans overall are a caregiver for an aging spouse or partner. But again, we see among those who have a spouse or partner who's 65 or older, the burden is pretty high, as 1 in 4 are playing that caregiving role. Our survey also asked about the impact that caregiving has on caregivers. And there we found sort of a mixed bag. Most caregivers say that caring for an aging parent, spouse, or partner has enhanced their relationship with that person, had a positive impact. But particularly when it comes to caring for aging parents, many people also point to negative impacts, and they say, this has taken a significant toll on their emotional well-being, their physical health, their finances, their job, and even their social life. So there are wide-ranging impacts for caregivers on coming out of caregiving and what that has on their overall well-being. And then finally, we asked about some policy proposals, if you can go to the next slide, that might help ease the burden for caregivers in the U.S. And here, I think this is most relevant for this discussion. We found strong bipartisan support for several policies, in particular when we asked about the federal government requiring employers to provide paid family leave for people who are caring for an aging family member. We found that 69% of adults overall favor that, and majorities of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, as well as Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents, support this type of policy. And I see this a lot in my day-to-day work, and I'm sure you all are aware that it's pretty rare that we see majority support from Republicans and Democrats for a particular policy issue. So this is an area where there really is the potential to find common ground, I think, across party lines. And just the last thing I'll mention is it's in some previous research that we've done on paid family leave for new parents, we find similar pattern of broad bipartisan support for policies that would encourage or require employers to provide paid family leave for new mothers and new fathers. So I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kim. Last up, we have Brian Houston. Brian, welcome to the committee, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee, for your time this morning. My name is Brian Huston. I'm an employment attorney, and I own a human resource consulting firm in Lenexa, Kansas. When I hear about mandatory paid leave, paid time off, my initial gut reaction is negative. Don't do it. How much compliance is this going to mean for my clients and their HR teams? However, there is one type of leave law that's been introduced around the US that puts no burden on HR. The state gives us a template, we add it to the handbook, payroll adds one line of code, and then it's out of the employer's hands. There's no additional job protection for these employees. We can go about doing business as usual, and we just reference the employee to the state when they have a need for this leave. So I would ask you first, is a fiscally responsible and employer-friendly paid leave option realistic? Is that even feasible or possible? Tell you, a couple years ago, my answer to that question would have been no. But I got to know these people and look into the details of how these programs work. It's extremely cost-effective, costs a lot more than short-term disability. It's no burden on the employer and helps the state in a myriad of ways. And lawmakers, I would just say to you today, you have a blank canvas. I don't think anybody expects Kansas to pass a paid leave law. We have 14 other jurisdictions to take data from that you guys have the full option to pick and choose what's most important to Kansans. You heard a lot about parental leave. I think that's very important to a lot of people in this room. And members of our coalition would love to work with you on a employer-friendly, fiscally responsible bill. So if any part of this speaks to you, please reach out to us. We'd like to see if we can write a custom policy for Kansas. I think it's also important to note that these aren't entitlement programs. You need to pay in to be eligible for it. And you're only eligible based on what you've paid in and what your pay rate has been with max caps. So there isn't a sense of an entitlement program or that this is unfair to members of the state. And I think if it's written well, it can be very good for business. You'll see as I talk here in a few minutes, there are a few states that these are entirely employee funded. So employers get to offer up to 12 weeks of paid leave that they paid 0 pennies for. That's very employer friendly. And there are a lot of levers we can pull and use in these type of programs that I think Kansans would find really impactful. I'm sorry to hear that the chamber is an opponent to this. I think my initial gut reaction would be the same, but we'd like to work with the chamber and with businesses to make sure that any program that comes in Kansas is employer friendly. So let's look at the landscape of where we're at today. In Kansas and nationally, it's about a third of employees who have access to short-term disability or paid family leave programs. Even our top quarter of wage earners, you see there, about 40% of them have access to these programs. And even at large employers with 500 or more employees, we're right around a third. In Kansas, it's the same. This is from a SHRM survey, and companies that report to SHRM tend to have better benefits and better time off options, and it's still under 30% in Kansas who report having these type of paid leaves available. So what is a paid family medical leave? The 14 other jurisdictions that have done this have really mirrored FMLA because people are familiar with how that works. It's up to 12 weeks, but again, you guys get to set how much time that actually is. Different states have said natural mothers, maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 8, maybe it's the full 12. And again, you have a blank canvas to decide what makes the most sense for Kansas with these type of programs. So generally, it's for your own serious health condition, for welcoming a new member to the family, or for an immediate family member, which you guys would get to define what that means, for their own serious health condition. And as I hinted to just a little bit ago, there are various different ways to fund these programs. The vast majority, it's a split. Employers pay in, employees pay in. As you heard, they're almost all about a 1% with maximum caps. After 150,000, you're not putting in anything. But even in California and Washington, D.C., they're fully employee funded. Employers contribute nothing, and their employees get up to 12 weeks of paid time off for these qualifying reasons. Every state and jurisdiction that's done it has small business exceptions. Colorado chose 10 employees or less. I think one state chose 50 employees or less. Where the employer, if you guys do decide, okay, it's split between the employer and the employee contributing, well, employers with 10 or less or 20 or less, they don't need to contribute at all, but their employees still get the benefit of it. And again, there are other creative ways. I think one state also has a tax benefit that small employers can request if they have employees taking leave. We understand maybe you need to pay more overtime or pay other people to make up that missed time off. And there are ways to actually reimburse small employers for that potential hardship. So some common employer concerns, especially small businesses, tend to ask questions about administration cost and work disruptions. Well, as I hit on earlier, these programs are administered by the state, so the administration is actually nothing. It's really nice as an HR administrator to not need to do 15 pages of FMLA type paperwork. We just send them a very short canned response to go talk with the state. And as far as cost, how much employers and employees contribute, again, you guys would have full discretion as to those amounts. For work disruptions, there are a lot of creative things states have done to address that, as well as what does qualify, what sort of things do we care about in Kansas? Again, whether that's only the parental leave, maybe it's only taking care of kids who have cancer and other serious diagnosis. Do we want the burden on parents who are taking their kids to cancer centers to also have unpaid time off? And right now, employers pay 100% of any PTO policy at the worst possible time when employees are doing nothing in exchange. These programs, you kind of pay a penny a day, and when employees are out, you pay nothing, and they're taken care of. So just in summary, I think these programs can be very good for business, and we want to make sure that any policy that comes before you is employer-friendly here. We think it's great for workers because similar to car accidents, we kind of know about how many new cancer diagnoses there will be, about how many new parents there will be in the state. And these things are predictable, and they're life-altering for the people going through them, but can we do anything to help ease that burden, especially during the really tough times? And I think there would be ripple effects to the state. If employees have these benefits available to them, less likely to jump on unemployment, less likely to use other state benefits. Same thing with the elder care portions of these laws. And let's face it, working people are the ones who are best able to take care of their family members. That's why they're in the workforce, because they're capable. So if we allow capable workers to take care of their aging parents, there can be less burden on the state, and that goes across the board for these type of reasons for leave. So thank you for your time, and I think Tracy will stand for questions.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brian. We're actually now going to have William Wilk from the Kansas Chamber up to give, again, the business side of view on this. And I think what we'll do after that is we'll hold off on questions, and if committee members have individual questions, they can ask after. So, Mr. Wilk, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. William Wilk, Senior Director of Government Affairs for the Kansas Chamber. Kansas Chamber appreciates the opportunity to provide opponent comments to the subject of paid leave. First and foremost, I'll be clear, the Kansas Chamber is and will continue to be adamantly opposed to any such bill before this legislature that would mandate paid leave, paid sick leave, paid family leave, or paid medical leave on the Kansas business community. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, 79% of workers have some form of paid sick leave. 91% of workers in companies with 500 plus employees and 70% of companies with 1 to 49 employees offer paid leave, family leave. Not every business has the same structure, as some businesses have a higher percentage of workers in the 16 to 24 category that are part-time workers. The Kansas Chamber opposes mandates of all forms on the Kansas business community and believes free markets, including the market of labor in exchange for payment, are the seed for economic growth through capitalism. We believe situations of paid leave are best left to be decided between the employer and then the employee, rather than a one-size-fits-all approach on the Kansas business community. Furthermore, the Kansas Paid Family Leave Act would create a new tax on employers and employees in the state for circumstances of paid leave. With this new tax, a trust fund managed by the state would be created to issue out payments for circumstances of paid leave, similar to the unemployment insurance trust fund. A policy proposal like what is outlined in the Kansas Paid Family Leave Act will just drive up the cost of business and put Kansas at a disadvantage in attracting new businesses if certain benefit packages are mandated by the state legislature. As it's been mentioned, there have been 13 states that have passed some form of paid leave. 11 states have implemented this policy, including Washington, D.C. According to the Tax Foundation's 2026 State Tax Competitive Index, 8 of those states rank in the very bottom in terms of competitiveness from 43 to 50. In closing, paid leave is just a costly, unnecessary mandate, and we would strongly oppose this policy. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Will. And like I said, we'll hold off on questions for now because the hour is late. But I will say we prefer your better half to come and testify in committee and not you, buddy. All right, committee. So that's the 2 presentations we have today, and I appreciate everybody coming and presenting these ideas. Obviously, neither of these ideas are going anywhere this session with how late we are, but it's thought-provoking. So thank you guys for that, everybody that was helpful in setting these up. We're going to try to do some final actions real quick. If we can get through these bills today and kick them out, we will not have to meet Wednesday. So let's try to kick these out. The first one that we're going to do is SB 232, and we'll go to Jason real quick for an explanation.
Mr. Chairman, SB 232 is the act relating to management of certain monies by the CAPERS Board of Trustees from the they're certified to them by the state treasurer, essentially, and this would allow investment in certain foreign government.
Committee, any questions for Jason? Seeing none, my ranking is not here who has an amendment, so I have an amendment for him. Don't know where he went. And this amendment's a simple one. A couple years ago, when we did the foreign divestment bill, there he is, we created, with the help of the majority leader and myself, we created what was called the countries of concern list. And this was using the Department of Commerce's list of what they called foreign adversaries. We didn't feel comfortable putting the word foreign adversaries in the statute book, so we called it countries of concern. The ranking is here now. Would you like to explain your amendment that I introduced for you?
Sure, yeah, he said it. The original definition in the base bill was a little bit vague for me. There's no list at all of like authoritarian or totalitarian governments as far as I know. And the only difference in terms of the state sponsor of terrorism, in terms of the Department of State versus our definition of countries of concern is that one includes Syria. Our definition of country concern doesn't include Syria. I don't think that they're really a player in this particular bill anyways. So I just figured it's better to default to something that we already had in statute.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And when you sent it to me last week, I was fine with that change. It makes a lot of sense to me. So committee, do we have any questions about the amendment? I see none. Do I have I guess I introduced it. Do you want to second it?
Second.
Okay. I will close and move my amendment. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Do we have any further discussion or amendments on SB 232? I see none. I will entertain a motion to pass out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I move that we pass Senate Bill number 232 favorably as amended out of committee.
Representative Neely with a very quick second today. Committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We will now turn to SB 375.
Mr. Chairman, SB 375 is the one about consumer protection and the Proxy Advisor Transparency Act.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions for Jason? Seeing none, I do have an amendment on this as well. And while he's passing it out, this isn't an enactment day. This is just clarifying the target of this legislation is proxy services. And what this amendment is, it's just clarifying that banks, savings and loans, or savings banks or affiliates with 10% or less of gross annual revenue from proxy services are exempt from this. This was an amendment requested on behalf of the Kansas Bankers Association. Any questions on the amendment? Representative Shu seconds it. Representative Bohai.
Is anyone opposed to the amendment?
No, from what I understand, the proponents of the bill and the KBA worked out a compromise on this language, and both are fine with it.
Thank you.
Yep. All righty, I see no further discussion. I have a second from Representative Shu, so I will close and move my amendment. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Do we have any further amendments or discussion? I see none. I will entertain a motion. Representative Steens.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I move that we pass Senate Bill number 375 as amended favorably out of committee.
Thank you, Chair Steens. Committee, you heard the motion. Seconded. You call me Vice Chair.
Oh.
Representative Bohai with the second. Committee, any discussion on the motion? I see none. Would you like to close them?
No, I close.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion, Representative Shu with a no. Motion passes. All righty, we are now on SB 435. Last one.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. This is the Capers bundle. It has the changing how the vice chairperson of their board is selected, changing how KPNF affiliation is charged in the first year, and working after retirement statutes. There's a couple of conflicting ones that are repealed.
Committee, any questions for Jason? I see none. I do have a conceptual amendment. Jason, what are we doing? Yeah, we'll do the effective date. We can change it to register. Okay. My conceptual amendment is changing the enactment date to the register. I have a second. Representative Bohai, any questions or discussions on the amendment? I see none. I will close and move my amendment. All in favor, aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Any further amendments or discussion on SB 435? I see none. I'll entertain a motion. Vice Chair Steens, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Hoheisel. I move that we pass SB 435 as amended out of committee favorably.
Okay. Do I have a second? Representative King, this thing, I was hoping somebody on the side would pipe up. Committee, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, would you like to close?
I close.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. That's all the work we have today. So there will be no meeting Wednesday. And reminder, next Monday, 9:30, Old Supreme Court room. We're doing the informational hearing. It's a joint hearing with the Senate. So remember, 9:30 next Monday in the Old Supreme Court room. With that, we are adjourned.